Okay, we're on lesson 20. I think we did a little bit of this last week, last class. I'm going to go back and start over on it just like we're starting from scratch, okay? And it won't hurt us to see it again. We have hutos, ho, huios, mu, necros, ein, kai, exason. And so this is an augment. Remember, we had augments in the imperfect tense. The augment is going to tell you it's past tense. And you only have the augment in the moods that are past tense, and it only happens in the indicative mood. And so it's a past tense and it's indicative mood. It's the only time you have it. And so that would be with your imperfect tense, and your aorist tense will have this augment. Now remember, the augment is right here at the beginning. Usually it's an epsilon, usually, and it may blend and become an eta under some conditions, okay? So that's the demonstrative pronoun this, hutos, rough reading, ho, huios, the son, mu, of me, necros, dead, being, and we haven't had this verb yet, I don't believe. It's from a, me, I don't think we've had it yet. Kai, and has come to life. Okay, he came to life, or he came back to life, or he came again. He lives again, basically. Come to life. The aorist tense is your third principal part of the Greek verb, and is the aorist tense. So we've had the first two principal parts already, and now we've got the third principal part. The aorist generally corresponds to the simple past or preterite, all right, in English. That's your past tense. It denotes linear action without regard to progress. Now that, kind of remember that. Now we learned the present tense as linear action with the action going on. But think of it this way. Now, some books will tell you it's point action. But what they're doing, and they're kind of misleading you if you're not careful. When they say point action, that's how it's viewed. And the action itself may be over a period of time. They may just say he lived or John lived. And they may just summarize his whole life in one statement. And of course, that's a whole series of events wrapped up in a ball. And so the aorist indicative mood, aorist indicative, is that tense that summarizes, and it can be linear action in this sense. The present infinitive, for instance, the vein, denotes linear action, to loose or to be loosing. All right. The aorist infinitive, to loose, denotes point or unmodified action. So now notice the difference. He called it linear action up here, but it doesn't give you the progress of it. So in this case, the aorist infinitive is to loose, denotes a point or unmodified action. So it's unmodified. Now, most of your infinitives will be, and I'm not saying 90% or anything like that, but probably half or so will be aorist infinitive. Aorist, it's an aorist loving language. So whenever he uses a present infinitive, it's usually for a reason to emphasize something else, and that's linear action. That's your present infinitive. So when the present infinitive occurs, that's what it's all about. Now, I would give you two passages that are, I think, important. But when you get the idea of teaching in 1 Timothy 2, verses 10 through 13, when a woman is forbidden to teach, it's not an aorist infinitive, it's a present infinitive, right? And so that's a linear action, and it's actually forbidding her to be a teacher of men. And of course, when women are told not to speak, it's also in the present infinitive. They're not to be the speakers in the congregation. It is not forbidding her to speak when she's not the speaker. For instance, when she's singing and there's a man leading singing, or if she's making the good confession. Does that make sense? So she is forbidden to be the speaker, but she's not forbidden to speak. And that would be, she's not forbidden to speak in the aorist sense, all right? The aorist is unlimited. Now, what this is, it's from a Greek word. It's an alpha privative. That's where the A comes from. So it has no boundaries. Horis is horizon. Our English word horizon comes from this, and that's boundary. That's a boundary of what you can see. And alpha privative then would be no boundaries. So it's unlimited. All right. The time element only comes in the indicative mood. So do not think of time in other moods. Comes in the indicative. Now, remember this, we tried to make this point pretty clear. Maybe I haven't emphasized it enough, but the time element is kind of incidental and in the Greek verbs. They did not look at things like we do in English. In our language, in English, you got to kind of get the English out of your head, out of your thinking, because in English, chronology is pretty important to us in our language. Tense is time. Tense is time. That's what it means to us. Whereas tense in the Greek is kind of action. What kind of action is going on? And that's what we're looking at. And of course, in the indicative mood, it would be the kind of action in the past time. But it's still the major thrust of it is what kind of action is it, even though it might be in the past time of the aorist. The imperfect is in the past time, but the kind of action for the imperfect was an ongoing action, whereas the aorist wraps it up in a little ball and looks at it all at once. And it may be the whole life of a man or a person. It may wrap up a century or two of time, but when it does, it's summarizing it and looking at it like it's a single event. So it's viewed more or less as if it were a single event. Not that it is, but it's viewed that way. Whereas if he's trying to give it a motion picture view of it, it would be the imperfect tense, like a motion picture. Whereas the aorist would be like a snapshot. Have I confused you now? Any questions? Okay. Now, the time element only comes in the indicative mood. The imperative mood, commandment, it's not there. The time element in the other moods comes from the context, strictly from context. The aorist with the indicative signifies point action and past time. It's viewed as point action. It's not necessarily is point action. So kind of, you might add the word viewed. It's viewed as point action in the past, and not necessarily that it is point action, right? This is to be contrasted with the imperfect, which is a linear. So the normal tense for past tense indicative mood will be aorist. The vast majority of the time it's aorist. And scholars tell us that whenever they use the imperfect tense, they were trying to stress the motion picture view of it, viewing it like a motion picture, an ongoing process. And so right here, this is the imperfect linear, a do on, I was serving, that's imperfect, and a do lusa, I served. Now notice you got your augment in both of them. And I want you to see the only difference is the last two letters in there. See, the sigma is kind of a marker over here for the aorist tense. The sigma is your marker. It does have an augment in the indicative mood. Now, it won't have an augment in the other moods, imperative mood, a commandment, and then subjunctive mood, which we haven't covered those. And there is an optative mood. And of course, your infinitives don't have augments on them because they're timeless. They're infinite. They can take all time, present, past, and so forth, okay? They're just kind of action. All right, any question? I hope I haven't confused you now. The action implied may actually have been continuous. That's what he tells us, repeated or interrupted. But students will pick up on this up here, and the aorist, they'll take this and they'll, right there that I've just highlighted, the aorist with indicative signifies point action in past time. And that could be misleading. It looks at it as if it were past, but the action implied, he comes down here and tells you that it may actually have been continuous. So probably I would have added the word here. The aorist signifies, or it looks at the action as if it were point action. That's the way it looks at it. It sees it that way in that context. So it'd take a man's whole life and view it as if it were a single act. And so it might have been linear. And so it's down here, it could have been continuous, repeated, or interrupted, right? But the aorist treats the action, now see, he tells you down here, as a point, simply as having taken place. Now that's what you want to get. This right here this is it right here. That's the idea. And this up here, if you stopped on this up here and above, you can get the wrong impression. Okay? So it's how it's viewed. And it's viewed as a point. It's wrapped up kind of in a neat little package. Think of it that way. And then it could have been continuous, repeated, interrupted, and so forth. Okay? But it simply treats it as if it were a point act. It just states it took place. Just sums it up. Okay? Isaacson, he lived. All right? And so you have the ending here for he, third person, singular, he lived. All right? So there's your third person singular ending right there, sin. Here's your first person singular ending right there. Notice you have an augment. You have an augment on both of them. Okay? And so this is from Zal, I lived. Okay, he lived. The regular aorist is usually shown by its context to refer to. It can't become an ingressive, and these are fancy words for just a beginning act. You may see these terms, and so they'll use those big fancy words, but that just means it's a beginning act. And so right here, see, go is I am silent, and so that the multitude, all the multitude, pon is all, the multitude was silent, was being silent, or became silent. And that will be Acts 15:12. He just takes three words out of that verse and just looks at them. Okay? So it's something that began at that time. In that context, you can see that in verse 12. All right. And in the context, you can see what silenced them. If you go back to Acts 15, I'll digress just briefly. Under the law of Moses in Deuteronomy 13 and Deuteronomy 18, there were two things that were required before you could accept a person as a prophet. There were two tests, and he or she had to pass 100%, get 100%, make a perfect A on both those tests. The first test was he couldn't preach or advocate or teach anything or prophesy or claim anything that contradicted any scriptures they possessed. Okay. And the second was he couldn't contradict himself, of course, either. But second was he had to perform a sign that always came to pass, never failed. Okay. And so in the context of Acts 15:12, both of those things had just occurred. There have been signs in Acts 2. There have been signs at Cornelius' household. There have been signs among the Gentiles with Paul and Barnabas. And then James then stands up and cites the Old Testament prophets. And this shows that the Gentiles were to come into the kingdom. And so he cites scriptures saying this is in accordance with the scriptures. So now the action had qualified the actions of Paul and Barnabas and Peter and the other apostles, and Peter in Acts 10, Cornelius' household, and it had justified them as being true prophets. The miracles were worked, and it was in harmony with what the Old Testament scriptures had said. Does that make sense? Now, this is why the multitude became silent. All right, we're getting off into the text of the Bible, but we're trying to learn the Bible with our Greek. All right, any questions or comments? All right. It could be a resultant act, a culminative act. So it could culminate or be the result of something. Hoti, that's when, an adverb, exale thing. Now, remember your augment. If you, this is erkomai, and it's from erkomai. Let's see if that's one of our words down here. I don't think it's in our vocabulary, but I want to check. No, it's not here. I will write it in up here, but I won't have diacritical markings on it, okay?
Did you say erkomai?
Yeah.
To go or come, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought we had that in maybe one of the future.
We had said that it's erkomai. It's this word. It's let me change it. This will be in symbol font, and it's erkomai with ek attached to it. Does that make sense? Don't have diacritical markings on there, but that's what it is. That's what this word is. And then it has the form, it becomes aothon. So it's like go and gone. It's irregular in that form in the aorist here, okay? So it has a little bit different form. So I don't know that we've had that word yet. I can't remember whether we have or not, but that's what it's from. And it's an irregular form of it. It becomes aothon, okay? Like go and gone in English, okay? Now, what this is, your augment will go right after the preposition. And so you'll augment this right here, this epsilon, and that's where they get this eta. And the kappa becomes a kasi, and then it's aothon. And so it's exaothon. And so the kappa becomes Chi, and your epsilon right here becomes an eta. So that's where that come from. And then the thon, the rest of it is a change in the form of it, a regular verb. All right, does that help a bit? When I departed from, and literally that's not departed from, let me erase that. That's to come out or go out. Go out, and this is to go out, and this is apo, from. So it's definitely ablative. The ek and the apo both only take the ablative case. So this is not genitive form. Now I know your lexicons, even your analytical lexicons, will probably give it as genitive case because they're 5-case men. But this is ablative case. Go out from, it more literally, when we went out from, or when I went out from, the own ending could be either singular or plural. When I went out from Macedonia, when I departed from Macedonia, went out from, when I departed from Macedonia, Philippians 4:15, right? So it's a culminative aorist here, culminates, finishes the action. Now, any questions? All right, so that's your augment right there. The epsilon augments this epsilon erkomai, okay? And we've got down here, this is diathan. This is to go when about doing good. And so this is also erkomai, but it's dia, okay? And who went about, and this is a compound word, again, I'm sorry, but ergo is to work, to do, and U is a prefix in Greek, which means good, has come into the English language too. I'll give you euphemism, eulogy, and several other words that have an EU beginning in the word. Euthanasia is supposedly good killing. Well, that's kind of a bad way to put it. When you murder people, okay, euthanasia. So, any questions? And so, who went about? The went about is from this word. Doing good. And unfortunately, what we have is we have a participle here, and so we haven't had that yet. Okay, all right. Any question? Acts 10:38. He's just looking at this verb here, but he's directly out of Acts 10:38. That's talking about Jesus, of course, but about doing good. What about only doing good, yet they murdered him, okay?
You said ergetone is, what verb is that? Is that the verb? Ergetone?
Right here. This is you, ergeo.
Ergeo.
Ergeo. Let me look it up in Thayer and give you the page number in Thayer. Look it up right quick.
Have we had that verb?
No, we haven't. It's you ergetel. It has and I'll write it for you right here, okay?
Okay.
Page 258 in Thayer. EUER. But it's only found in this one passage in the whole Bible. So So it's found one time in its Acts 10, 20, 38, and it's the only place it's found in the whole New Testament. Okay. But the diacritical markings, it has a smooth breathing over the upsilon, as it would normally. And then the epsilon at the end of it is accented with an acute. Okay. So that's how it's accented.
Thank you.
Smooth breathing right here with an epsilon, and an epsilon here has an acute on it. You're Getal. You're Getal. Okay. So that's what that was. It's only found there. It's not found anywhere else. It wasn't in my vocabulary. I was groping a minute there for it. But it's only found one time. But I figured out what it was just by looking at the structure of it. Okay, what it come from, and that is probably, if you study it more thoroughly, to do good, to bestow benefits. That's how Thayer defines it. It's in the Septuagint, and it's a Greek translation of the Old Testament, and it's quite often in the Attic writings. That's what Thayer tells us. Okay. All right. Any questions? Now let me tell you a quick thing about lexicons. Thayer is strictly a lexicon of the New Testament Greek, which means Thayer has every New Testament Greek word that's in the New Testament in the lexicon. So it's a dictionary strictly of New Testament Greek. If you want a lexicon of the Septuagint, there are lexicons of Septuagint Greek. I have one of those. It's by, well, three men's name. One of them is Lust, L-U-S-T. You can look in my bibliography of my stuff and you can find it. Okay. And then, of course, if you want the New Testament with some of the so-called church fathers' writings, you'll get Bauer, Hart, and Gingrich, and Danker. And that's the latest one. Those things are about $150, $150. So they are not cheap. You can get a used one around probably somewhere and find one somewhere at the used bookstore. But it'll have all of the New Testament plus some of the other New Testament writers, particularly like the church fathers. So if you want to study them and read with them, that's probably you're going to need one of those. I don't think it's as good in the New Testament Greek as the Thayer personally. That's my opinion. All right, and they say it's more modern, but I think the men that were doing it and writing it weren't as conservative about the scriptures and their views. Okay, so I still like Thayer. Okay, and it's an old standby. Any questions? All right. I have another one. Some others. Liddell and Scott has some of the older Greek in it, and I have a big lexicon that one of the members where I preach, good friend of mine, he went to out doing some what they call on Saturdays, where they go out and go to I guess they call it where you buy stuff at people's having their yards. What do they call that? I'm trying to think what to call it. I don't know.
It's a garage sale?
Yeah, garage sales. And he found this book, and it was a big, thick lexicon, Greek lexicon. And he sold it to him. It was not in real good shape. The backs on it weren't very good. He paid him 25 cents for it. He said, I bet Marion can use it. So he gave it to him, and I was just happy to get it. But it's really got a whole bunch of Greek words in it. And so it's a big, thick one. That rest was probably about 4 inches thick. Okay.
Who's the author? Who's the author of it?
Remember, it's in some of my references. And I can find the references. I'll send you the references after class if you'll remind me at the end of class. I'll look it up, send it to both of you, okay? But it's in some of my,
Okay, if I forget,
but it's an old copy, and it's 1860 or 70 or somewhere thereabouts. But anyhow, I was real happy to get it. It's been helpful from time to time. As in the types of aorist, as in English past, there is more than one way to form the Greek aorist. We may say walk, walked in English, walk or walked, from the simple past by adding a regular ending in the present stem. We may go, so, we may go, so, go, went, am, was, and said, and sat by changing the stem, right? The regular formations are called the weak verbs. They can't be changed. The strong verbs can be changed. Does that make sense? So we got weak and strong. So the first aorist is weak. It has to follow all the rules. It can't go against the rules. We call it weak. That's how I remember it. And that the irregular is, it can go against the rules. That's your second aorist. We'll cover that later. We're going to take the aorist that follows all the rules right here, right now. That'll be your first aorist. That's the difference in them. One of them has to follow all the rules, and the other one doesn't. It goes off on its own. So right here is luo. There's your augment. There's your stem, lu. And so all they do is put an augment at the front and a sa, a sigma, and alpha, and that will get it. And that's first person singular. There's your stem again down here. You have your augment at the front. At the end, you have the sauce. Sauce, say, and your augment, again, your augment again, and your augment at the beginning and say. Sauce, say, and then there's your stem, and your augment all the way down, and salmon. So your endings will be sauce, say, salmon, satay, sushi, san. Sauce, say, salmon, satay, san. Now think about this. O, ace, a, pretty close. Omen, this is salmon. Ete, and a bit satay. And then san, that's a little bit different. Then you got your stem. There's no augment because it's infinite. It doesn't take time. It takes any time, past, present, future. And so sa is your endings. That's your infinitive. All your infinitives will have that ending. Right? Your tenth sign, sa, that's your tenth sign, ending secondary, has a negative. However, it has dropped in the third singular as epsilon, probably by analogy with imperfect. So there's some rules that may come out to be these forms, but that's your forms. And the weak verbs, your first aorist, all follow those forms. That'll be your endings for them. It's kind of easy to remember this sate and ete, salmon and and so we have lu, luo, lue, lues, luamen, luomen, luete, luusi. And so we don't have the usi. It's a little different. But sate almost looks like the ete, and the salmon looks a lot like the omen. You can kind of see those two there. Any question? All right. No questions? All right. I loosed, you loosed, he loosed. All right. I loosed, you loosed, he loosed. We loosed, you all. Good Southern English, you loosed, they loosed. All right. Any questions? Augment. Same rules for augmenting that we had with imperfect. So you didn't have to learn anything new there. Your middle voice. Now then, here's one thing I told you last week, but I want to tell you again. This is important. The future tense, we go back to it, it has a different form for the middle and passive voices. They're different in form. The middle has a separate form than the passive. Right? The aorist is the same as the future. Actually, the future was made off the aorist stem. That's what they tell us. The form of it was. So basically what we've got here is the aorist and the future both have separate forms for the middle and passive tense voices. Right? So you're going to have a completely different form. Now, in your other tenses, middle and passive have the same form. It's a contextual question as to which one you have, middle or passive. Right? I argue that some verbs by their very nature imply passive, and some verbs by the very nature of the verb itself kind of imply a middle. And this, what the verb is doing, we're getting that basically from context. But some you can't tell, it could be either. And so it's a contextual question as to which one it is. Okay, we have our augment again, and just look, and now you see the augment on all of them here. The first letter, of course, is your augment. And so now we have a samain, so, and sato. And samain, so, sato. And of course, your augment, samatha. And that's like omen, but omatha was our present ending. Pretty much looks the same. Saste, and that's pretty much essay. And what we had in the present, santo. Okay, and your middle infinitive is sasta. That's your middle infinitive form. So we lose for ourselves, we all lose for ourselves. That's your middle infinitive. Now I'm gonna stop right here. We'll get out of this, unless there are questions, get into another file. Do you have questions?
Yeah, how would you say the infinitive in English?
To lose for yourself, middle.
Okay, and then in indicative, it'd just be to lose.
It could be to lose yourself. To lose yourself. It might not be used very much, but you could lose yourself from your bonds, for example. You could unloose your bonds, unloose yourself.
Okay, and then the active, it'd just be to loose?
To lose, yes.
Okay. Okay.
Or to lose yourself, or to do the losing yourself somehow. It's to or for yourself that you're doing it. Okay. All right. Any other questions? That's a good question. All right. I'm gonna get out of this. Stop sharing. Share again. I'm gonna go into information for students. I think I got it on the right place. Can you see it? The file?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
All right. What I've got is this file, and I sent it to you before class, so you have this file. You have the latest iteration of it. I work on it from time to time to add more to it. It is up to date with what you need, and what I'm trying to do is get it for the whole book. I put the section numbers where these are found. Active, indicative, and it's your section number, J.W. Roberts' book. And we have the present, we've already covered it. The imperfect, we covered the future. So these are all, this is your conjugation of them. First singular, second singular, third singular, first plural, second plural, third plural. And this will be the in present, active indicative, okay? And that'll be present, imperfect, future. Now we're on the first aorist. And so saw, say. Now that might have a movable nu, depending on what follows it, say. Saman, sate, san. Those are endings with the augments them. And when we get into the first aorist, that's what we have here. We'll come down, and that we have the present. And I want you to look at Saman and Omain. The last three letters are the same over here. See? All right. And your future is Soma, just like the present. Omai, Soma. Lue, Luce, Lueta, Luceta, Luomatha, I'm going back and forth, Lusomatha, see, Este, Luceste. All they do is add a sigma to it. Luonta, Lusonta. That's your present and your future. See how they function? You can just look at them across there. Now, your imperfect has the augment, and we have a main ending, main, and we have an eto. These are different here. We have an eto and a sato, omatha and samatha, este, and lusaste becomes an alpha. It's onta, and luonta, and luonta, onto, and santo. So it gets a sigma and changes that connecting vowel from an omicron to an alpha. And so it looks a whole lot like the same as that imperfect. A lot of it's very similar, okay? You're going to see the main ending over here on the second aorist as well. I'll get to that later. That's one that is strong. It can go off on its own. But you see the omatha ending, samatha, and it's just like this over here in omatha. It winds up looking a whole lot like the present. And it gets strong and it just kind of looks on its own and goes off on its own. That looks like the present there, over here. That'd be the second. That's the strong one. Este. See the endings to those four letters? And they're the same. So it's not as hard as you might think because it winds up picking up like it's up here. This ending picked up like the imperfect ending. All right. And so it kind of jumps around a bit. But it's endings that you've seen, and that can fool you right there. You can get fooled with that one and thinking it's the same as imperfect, but there's a little difference. The last three letters are the same, but it has some more in here. It has, okay. It won't work. This won't conjugate in the second aorist. It doesn't exist. So it's a different word. So some words are second aorist and some are first aorist. So luo won't conjugate over here in this column. Luo doesn't fit over there. It can't go over there. All right. Does that help? All right. So some of these structures, you're going to see the perfect ending over here later. That's the same as right over here, my, and rather my ending over here. So we got some consistency all the way through. Just some other rules. How can you tell the difference between an aorist and a present? Well, a present won't have an augment. That's one thing that you're going to see, and the aorist will have a sigma. It'll have a sigma and an augment, and even though when they look like imperfect looks a whole lot like it, the imperfect doesn't have that sigma. That's your marker for it. Does that help? A little bit?
Yes, sir.
Any questions? So you have this right here. You know, it might be real good if you'd print this page out and maybe get another page that you would put on it and put it on front and back and then have it laminated. You just flip it over and have it. Or this would have a lot of your verbs on there, wouldn't it? Plus your infinitives. All right, this has all of your infinitives. Okay.
Yeah, it's really good. Thank you.
So I hope that helps a bit. Here's some more down here for indicative mood. It gets the pluperfect and the future perfect, which is rare, but we do have it in here. And so if you put these two together, put this on the back and the other one on the front, you'd have basically a structure for all your verbs. You'd have them all laid out, and with your section numbers in Robert's grammar. So I think that could be helpful to you if you would do that, and you just go down and put this page on one side, and then go down to the next page, put it on the other side, and you could cut and paste, put something else in there down here at the bottom too if you want to. Of course, you can do that with your file. You know how to cut and paste, put up something here. Oh, I don't know, right here, you might just put all verbs. You got them, okay? You put that on the back of it, right? Here's a me, this being verbs down here. These are real important. So, but they're all in this file. And of course, you can just, how to cut and paste. You just drop them into your notes somewhere if you want to, and you got them right there. I've double checked these, and I think they're all good. I don't think there's any errors in them. If you find an error, I'd be happy. I'd be helpful if you'd help me to find it. Great. We've gone almost an hour. We've gone about 50 minutes. Do you have any questions? All right.